Let's talk about my switch from a MacBook Pro to a custom-built PC, how it's been over the last 5 months, my thoughts on it, and everything in between. But somebody please! Wow, that was really loud. Roll the intro. I'm fine. This table isn't connected to the top the tabletop is, so if I bang on it, it's really loud. So I switched from a MacBook Pro to a custom-built computer about 5 months ago, and here are my thoughts using the PC for an extended period of time. My overall thoughts are that I actually like it a lot, more than I thought I would. And I think what it comes down to is learning sort of the ebb and flow of how a Windows computer is different than a Mac computer. Every Mac computer I've ever used was either a MacBook Pro, an iMac, or a Mac Pro. I've had Mac Minis, but I never really used them. So I've used those 3 computers. And I would say the biggest difference between a Mac computer and a Windows computer is the I/O. So I have a lot of monitors that I enjoy personally, so I always used the Mac computer but plugged it up into the monitor, which sort of made the MacBook Pro a little bit redundant, and same kind of with the iMac where I was paying all this extra money for screens and kind of underpowered hardware, but I love Mac OS so much, so I always wanted to continue to use those Mac computers. The first thing that I like about the custom-built PC is the I/O. The second thing that I like a lot about the custom-built PC is sort of Windows.
The long-awaited Windows 10 operating system has made its worldwide debut today.
Windows 10 is out today.
Microsoft newest operating system, Windows 10, now available.
Windows 10.
Windows 10.
Windows 10.
I love Mac OS. I like Mac OS way better than Windows. It's far and away the best operating system in my opinion on a computer. Don't talk to me about Linux because honestly, I don't care. Linux is too confusing to me and I don't have the time to learn it. Whether it's confusing or not doesn't really matter. It doesn't run Premiere Pro, so it's not for me. So it's between Mac OS and Windows. And honestly, I've even Hackintoshed this computer, but I kind of went back to Windows because of the reliability issues with Hackintoshing. That's another video for another day. Actually, I've made that video before and everyone hated on me for it. So maybe not another video for no day ever. But basically, Windows is okay. It's not as good as Mac OS. It's not as fluid. It's not sort of as intuitive. I don't really like the way that Windows works. But I've really learned the quickest way for me to edit videos, use OBS when I need to use OBS, use Premiere Pro, use a lot of different things with Windows. And a lot of the time there are a few extra steps when you're using a Windows computer, whether it's, having to restart it because it's constantly updating in the background, or there's always a new security update, or you have to restart the application because it crashed. Those are the types of problems that I never really had on Mac OS. Obviously, programs crashed and I had problems with programs. I mean, I'm not saying that it was perfect, but on Windows, it seems to happen a lot more. But I would say I've learned how to use Windows and it's fine. It's definitely usable. It's not nearly as bad as maybe I've made it out to be. It's not quite as functional as Mac OS in my opinion because it doesn't fit into my Apple ecosystem of products. But what it does do is it does everything that I need it to do, and that's pretty much enough. Third reason I've actually enjoyed the computer is the upgradability and the power. Now this is a no-brainer. This is a huge sticking point with Mac computers versus Windows computers. Obviously the only Mac computers you could buy upgradability-wise are either iMacs, and upgrading those are pretty sketchy because you have to pretty much touch an open power supply, which could lead to death, so I never suggest upgrading an iMac, or upgrading a Xeon-based computer. And Xeon processors are great and all, but for what I do, that's not really something that I need. I need more of like a prosumer hardware, which is sort of what I have in my computer now. I was able to find a 6800K with an X99 motherboard and 16 gigabytes of RAM with an AIO cooler for I think around $250, which is a really good deal. Obviously, the 6800K is, at the time, was amazing. Now, a few years later, with the release of the 9900K, 8600Ks even are better. There are better processors on just the consumer side, but the 6800K was so cheap with the motherboard that I kind of had to jump on it. And I've enjoyed it a lot. And it's nice to have a really powerful computer. I've gone back to the MacBook Pro to edit a video, one of my videos on it, and it chokes up and lags a lot because it's just a quad-core processor. I know just a quad-core processor, but 4K videos, and I try to have some color grading and a little bit more intensive stuff, it chokes it up considerably, especially with the GTX 1070 inside of there. The CUDA cores chew through a lot of my editing. It's not seamless. It doesn't just scrub through at full resolution on the Premiere Pro timeline perfectly every single time, but it works really well, and it doesn't slow me down, which I really enjoy, whereas the MacBook Pros have slowed me down in the past. I always sort of overlooked it because I like macOS so much, but the MacBook Pros, and any Mac really that I've ever had, slowed me down. Whether it was because it was a quad-core processor or because the screen was too intensive in the iMac, whatever it was, it slowed me down, and it actually made it kind of frustrating to edit. But now it's easy to edit videos. My SSD is fast that I bought, that I chose. CPU is fast, the GPU is fast. They're all not the top tier of anything, but they're all really good, and it wasn't that expensive. And that's number 4, the cost. My whole computer, after you factor in what it actually cost me, was around $380. The case I got for free because I took it from a computer that I bought and then sold, so the case was extra. The power supply, same thing. Bought and sold computer parts, made money on that deal and got a power supply for free. Motherboard, CPU, and RAM was all around $200, $250, and then the GPU I pulled out of a system that I bought and then sold the other parts for a little bit of a loss technically, but I only ended up spending about $150 on the GPU. So when you add it all together, it's around $350 to $400 for a 6800K 6-core processor with a GTX 1070. Now, to get a similarly priced computer on Apple's side, you would get roughly a mid-2012 15-inch MacBook Pro with like probably 8 gigabytes of RAM and a 250 gigabyte SSD. Obviously, significantly worse. That comes with the screen, but if I'm talking about raw power, I already have the screens, it's way worse. But then you look at what you would get if you wanted to get similarly spec'd items from Apple with a similar GPU, similar CPU, RAM, power supply, SSD, all that stuff. It would be an iMac 21.5 inch with a 6-core i5 with, is it 8400B, I think? To get a similarly priced Apple computer, it would be a 21.5 inch iMac with a Retina 4K display. And I know you pay for the 4K display, but Apple doesn't offer anything else that has the specs that my computer has. You would get an i5, I believe it's an 8500 6-core 3.0 gigahertz Intel Core i5. That's pretty similar to the 6800K. Obviously, the 6800K is a different type of processor, but if we're just going based on benchmarks, that's a pretty similar processor, basically. You'd get 8 gigabytes of RAM, the Vega 20 graphics with 4 gigabytes of HBM2 memory, 512 gigabyte SSD, none of the keyboards or anything. The whole thing would cost you $2,149. Now, if we subtract the screen, which is kind of unfair because you can't get those specs unless you buy it with the screen, but if we subtract the screen, we would take off like what, $400 or $500 for a nice 4K display like that is. $400 or $500, you're still talking about spending over $1,600 for a computer that I bought, obviously used, but I was able to pick up for under $400. Now, if we were to find something like that used, it would probably cost roughly $1,600. You subtract the price of the screen, but it doesn't matter if you can't subtract the price of the screen because the price of the screen is included. But if we were, it'd be like $1,100, which is still insane. It's still more than double the price, almost triple. And I know that Apple, you pay for a lot more with the software than you do with the hardware, and it makes sense because of the optimization, the free apps you get, all this extra bonus stuff. But for me, that stuff isn't worth it right now because of the components that I have. I think a really great budget way to get into the Apple ecosystem, it's like an iPhone 8 Plus, a cheap iPad, like a $249 iPad, and then AirPods. And then for the computer, you don't really need a MacBook because that's what the iPad is. So for the intensive stuff that I like to do, I have a Windows computer because of the price. It makes way more sense. So for me, I buy a lot of stuff on price, and it's tough for me to swallow the Apple pill sometimes because it's so much money. Now, obviously, there are other computers I could buy that run Mac OS, like the 2012, 2010 Mac Pro upgrade and everything, but that's still going to be significantly more expensive, and the CPUs aren't as powerful as the 6800K. Now, that's a lot of glowing about how great the Windows computer is, but there are obviously some problems with it. The biggest problem I would have is just reliability.
Microsoft launched Windows 10, and almost immediately, people noticed that they had stepped up their game heavily in terms of tracking everything you do.
Windows 10. I would advise all people who enjoy and respect your privacy to not install this software on your computer.
But why I stopped using Windows 10?
Windows 10 forced upgrade.
The update is apparently randomly deleting users' personal files.
I have run into a significant amount of problems where I have to restart the app. Premiere Pro crashes probably once every 2 videos I edit, which isn't terrible, but it used to be a little bit more. It's been a little bit less since the newest Premiere Pro was released. So the reliability isn't there in Mac OS. It's really easy to use. Everything is convenient. I love Mac OS. It's a better version of software in my opinion, but Windows is just not quite as reliable. The next negative thing is that it's something that needs to sort of be maintained. So if the Windows computer, if there's a problem, I have to fix what the problem is. Now, I haven't had any problems on this specific computer, but I build and sell a lot of computers on the side, and what I've noticed is sometimes they don't work, so you gotta troubleshoot it. So you have to figure out, is it the motherboard, CPU, RAM, power supply? A lot of the times it tends to be the power supply, but there's a lot more work that goes into it. So for me, it's a $350 computer, but the amount of work that I put into building it could be valued at $200-300. For me, it's easy. It takes less than an hour to put a whole computer together. Some people might think it takes longer, but it doesn't. I'm better at it now. But it's one of those things where it's sort of a skill that I have acquired. So for me to calculate that into the price doesn't really count for me because I know how to do it. But somebody that doesn't know how to build a computer, it's like, well, that's not fair because the computer to build it would be significantly more. Yeah, I understand. But I would say that those are the 2 things I don't like about the Windows computer. All in all, it's been a great experience. I'm gonna continue to use it. I just sort of put in a new setup. I love the flexibility that you get with Windows and what it allows you to do. Now, what I would love to be able to do is run the same computer with macOS on it. It's illegal and it's hard to do, in my opinion. I'm not a good software guy, so maybe that's why, but it's tough to do with specific components. So I would say for me, with my setup right now, I love having the Windows computer and I'm going to keep it for a long time. The way everything works is really nice and I like it a lot, but there are a few things that definitely are annoying, but there are a few things that are annoying with Mac computers too. If I had significantly more money or if I was worse with money, I would probably be using a Mac again, but what I find is I need to use what's best for me. And right now that's a Windows computer. My fiance is using the MacBook Pro for herself, for what she does. It's a little overkill, but she's using it right now and it's nice, but it's just unnecessary in my opinion to have that right now for me. It's not as powerful, it's more expensive. To get something similarly as powerful as the Windows computer would be significantly more money. And right now, trying to pay off all of our debt, student loans and all that stuff, it's tough for me to suggest for myself to get a Mac computer. So if you're looking in the market right now, these are my reasons for getting it. If you're not buying unpriced, Windows computers are good. Mac computers, I think, are a little bit better. If you could just go strictly based on price is not an option. But if price is an option, like it is for most people, Windows is a great way to go. All right, thank you for watching the video. I'm Scott with Techno Eclipse. Whew, that was a fun video. Let me know what you think about this new setup. I think it's fun. I like it. I like having the table. It's fun right here. And I like this. I feel like I'm a little bit more, I feel like I'm friendlier like this. All right, I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks again for watching. Peace out.